Welcome back to Green and White. Today we're visiting some very popular type of garden, a food forest. But these food forests aren't like many other food forests that you might have seen. They mix with art and creativity. Let's hear the story from Martin, who created these gardens and has been working on them for a few years now.
Right, who am I? Who am I? Well, that's a very good question. It's not definable. I'm the universe's best example of me. It's about the best I can say. But of more interest is, how did this food forest get created? Why? And that's got its own story, and it's sort of in a roundabout way to do with sculpture, just like this one, or whatever. So it'd be about 4.5 years ago, the place where I did sculpt became no longer useful for the purpose. And the lighting was all wrong. Sideways lighting is what's required for this work. And I went searching for a place to have a new little workspace, and I found one that felt just wonderful. And it was only about this in diameter. But Heather said, no, you can't have a sculpture workshop just there. And I thought, oh. So I thought, well, I need something to do, because in a sense, I'm one of those people that can't leave well enough alone. If I can make it flow better, I'll try it. Now, this area, which you'll be seeing on this video, back then was a tangle of up to 5 metre high gorse, old man blackberries with stems as thick as my thumb, every noxious weed known to man, pine trees, you name it, it was all there. You couldn't walk through it, you couldn't see through it. And I'd thought about this, and I said to Heather, this is her property, she's the boss of it, I said to Heather, what about if I do something down there? That's this area here. And fairly long silence, because it didn't look like you could do anything here, basically, I guess. And said, oh, all right. And having known Heather for a few years by that time, and I said, but there is one condition. Oh, yeah. You have no say in what I do down here. Oh, there was a very long silence. Very long silence. But in the end, she said, all right. So that meant I could do whatever I liked down here. Now, the point here, it's like the sculpture. I have no idea what I'm going to do. But it was a possibility, and it was something that she couldn't do anything with. And thus started the food forest. And it ended up basically being created with a machete and a spade. And I started way down there somewhere. And as I don't plan ahead on things, it was just start somewhere and see what happens. So the whole food forest thing resulted. Now, it's not really a food forest, but as we call other parts, sort of things like the bamboo forest, it seemed logical to call it something like that. And thus the food forest started. So that's it in simplistic terms. was how it came about. But the rest was multiple wavings of machetes and axes and digging out pathways. And I took advantage of one day when she was in bed not feeling the best, to make a connection path up into the rest of the garden. No consultation there. That was a lucky one, but I got away with it. And thus starts the food forest. And from then, well, wherever you do, it's obvious. You need a path here. Okay, you dig a path and you get so far. Well, okay, well, maybe that should go up there. Now, this workshop here that's overlooking all these wonderful dahlias, I'm biased there. I was standing in the middle of a sea of blackberries that I'd hacked to bits, and I looked around at me, at the sky. Oh, wonderful lighting, just amazing. Sun rises over there, summer sets there, winter it rises over there, sets there. So this became my spot for a sculpture workshop. Now, at that point, it was the beginning of the COVID thing. When New Zealand had its first lockdown, I had an idea that was going to happen, so I whipped into town and got some ground treated posts, and that was my basis. And like everything else in here, basically, I scrounged stuff from on the property and around the place and built whatever I needed according to whatever materials were on hand. I'm right into pallets these days. But in between all that, it was just endless work of digging out paths, and trying to figure out where would go what. And then we had some from Heather's family donated a whole bunch of blueberries, so I had to put a blueberry garden in, which meant that it needed to be netting, and the soil itself here isn't exactly wonderful, and it's required a long time to bring it up to health. And some of the big trees, which I'm not allowed to touch, don't exactly help because their tree roots come along underneath the ground. First season, you get a good crop of veggies. Second season, despite the additives, not so good, because the eucalypts in particular, the roots come up from underneath and suck the life out of everything. So that, again, because there's no defined plan, it actually means one's quite flexible. And I thought about it a bit, and then I realised that the local resource, mussel boys, they occasionally wash ashore. I collected them after storms, cut them in half, grew plants in. So far that's working really well. At least the dahlias seem to think so, that's all right. So that's basically how the whole thing started. And ever since then, it's just been a bit of madness, racing around trying to keep on top of what I created. I'm quite happy to create things, but maybe not so keen on maintenance. But then you look out the view and see all the colour and the dahlias, and first thing in the morning, you know, the golden hour, it just glows. And this year, the dahlias have been and are absolutely stunning. So one must continue. And a few people have donated dahlias, bought a few bits and pieces. What more can I say? It's the visuals that make it. Although it's more than the visuals, it's the feel of the place. And that's unique to everyone. And what people don't at first realise as they're going around looking at the sculptures, the gardens, the labyrinth, whatever, and generally having an amazing experience. And as I like to point out, it's not the things you're looking at, it's yourself you see. And if you see beauty, that's beauty within yourself, and it just happens to be expressed for you in the flowers or the general feel of the place. You asked me about the challenges of the place. Well, the whole place is a challenge. Even just doing it's a bit of a challenge, but it's like life. You live it, you're right in it, and whatever it is that comes up that seems like a challenge, what I always try and remember, I think it's pretty fixed now, is that the universe never offers you anything that you don't have a solution for. So that makes it easy. You know there's a solution, you've just got to look around and find it and do it. So the challenges aren't so much a challenge. And with the garden, it's actually like creating a sculpture. You know, with the likes of this sculpture, there was nothing specific planned other than a figure 8 infinity symbol, and it grew into whatever that's going to be when it's finished. Now, it took me a while, I'm a bit slow really, but I was getting really involved with creating gardens for food. Times are looking a bit interesting ahead, and I picked up on this a few years ago, so we needed food gardens and a place to grow them, and there was nowhere in the rest of the place where I would even dream of being allowed to make any gardens, so I had to make them here. But a challenge? No, it wasn't a challenge. It's more just letting things flow, and I wander through, and I know I've done a lot of this, like with the sculpture, but how? I don't know. You're just in there in the moment doing it. So no challenge really, just a lot of work. And let's face it, if you're living in the moment, it doesn't matter what's gone by or what's ahead, it's just now. And if you just cope with that moment now, where's the challenge? It keeps me permanently broke because I don't have very little in the way of income. So I basically be putting it into endless quantities of compost and such like, and there's a huge bug problem really, and a bird problem. The pheasants, they dig up your potatoes, they eat your dahlia tubers, so I'm forever scaring them away. But a lot of bugs here. I'm used to climates like down the South Island. They have proper climate down there, real winters, real springs, summers, autumns, all quite definable. This place I'm inclined to see as a bit of a green prison. I've been known to say this a few times. Fortunately, the one place that does guarantee to get at least a little frost is this area in here. And there's my bug control. Let nature do it. And as I watch on, the birds come and deal to a lot of bugs, not the bronze beetles, the New Zealand bronze beetles, but I observe the habits of birds, like you get flocks of wax eyes or silver eyes going around eating all the little insects this time of year. And after a year or two, I noticed that the fantails were joining them, and they'd go round with them. And the blackbirds would always be on the ground underneath to get anything that went to the ground. And this season, I see there's tui, young tui, following along behind and doing the same thing. It's quite clear to me that the whole organism of the garden, or however one describes it, is something that works together, and it's in my best interest not to interrupt it too much. And I'm forever apologising when I'm hauling something out of the ground and changing something, but you know, this is how the universe works. It only does two things that I can see. It expands and it changes, and everything fits within there. So I guess it's handy to be on the good side of whatever's driving all this. I can't tell you what it is. I have no idea. Well, I have a few, but it's just, people get bored with hearing me say this, but I'm not a sculptor or a photographer or any other thing. My greatest skill is in not knowing how to do things. So you're presented with it and you look around, and if you need be, go read a book or something and you learn and you do it. So the limitation of, say, being a sculptor or a photographer or a gardener or whatever And people are very, very prone to defining something. Now, when you define something, that's all it is. It excludes everything else. I prefer, to whatever degree is possible, to remain undefined. My feeling is that's more in tune with the way the universe works. We're quite defined beings as personalities, but when you define something, it's either defined as something you don't want anything to do with it, so you've got no effect on that, or it limits you to your definition. So I'm none of those things. And I've never had that limitation that I'm aware of. Over the years, I've just got used to just starting something and see what happens. And that's what I've been doing for a long time. And this garden now, quite clearly, took me a while, as I was saying earlier, to realise it's a living sculpture. Now, the stone sculpture has one advantage over that. It doesn't grow weeds. It doesn't get any bigger. I can set it all up, stick it on a fence post somewhere, and it's no longer anything to do with me. Again, it's the people that come along and look at them, whatever the art object is, and they're seeing themselves, and that's nothing to do with me. I'm not the slightest bit interested in that, because it's you, which is also sort of me in a sense, I guess. Anyway, it doesn't pay to start thinking about things, because the interesting thing is you can only think about things or speak about things. Like now I'm speaking about them. It gives you no sense of the experience of it. Hence, back to the same theme, trying to be present in the moment as much as you can. It gets addictive after a while. You just start somewhere, and there's a natural flow. You may not understand where it is, but if I'm digging a path, like I started a path over there, and I was looking there, and it was just obvious that maybe some of it should go up there, so it went up there, and one down there, so it went down there. And as I was being a little bit lazy, as I was digging the soil out, the topsoil, which is, we'll call it topsoil, and I would just throw that in piles, and then being lazy, I thought, when I had a log available, I threw some logs out, spread the soil out, and called it a garden. Didn't require any planning at all. And then when you got that in place, it sort of becomes obvious where the next direction might go. And it's life. People get very hooked up in the idea that things should be this way, and a bit of that. But I don't see that has to be true at all.